Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks everyone for attending. Was there any public comments submitted to the governance committee?
No, I didn't receive any.
I'll let you guys look at in your packet of the minutes to this is the August meeting. Remember, we didn't have a September meeting because we were going right into the festival, so we opted to not have that meeting. So these are from our August. You have to dust off your memory banks and review our August meetings. I'll take a motion in a second when you're ready. Betsy?
I move that we approve the minutes of August 22nd, 2022.
I'll second.
I'll second. I just had a quick question, Cynthia. When it at the end, so you were the staff member present, but at the end, so Josh does the minutes. Does he go off the recording then?
He does, yes,
Got it. Okay.
because he doesn't work Mondays.
Got it. Okay. Great. I think that's it. Well, all in favor of approval of the minutes as moved by Betsy?
I'll abstain.
I was not at that moment a member of the committee, so
Correct.
maybe I should just abstain.
Correct.
Well, it's
Sounds
here.
good.
I was absent, so I'll abstain.
All right, two abstentions, Diana and Ron. Great, thank you. Today we've got two items, item 4 and item 5 to review. And this is an important time as we start to gear up for the second half of our year, which gets pretty busy. Really after December onward gets pretty active for the governance committee as we roll up to the annual meeting in June, and if there's new appointments and whatnot. So this is a full time to review some of these items. And the first on our list is the 2023 work plan. And we've got a number of, hey, welcome, Rachel. You only missed the minutes, so we're just getting into item number 4 right now. So there's a number of you who've had some experience in developing this work plan, and I was hoping maybe Steve, if you could help remind us like what the origin of this was and how it helps the governance committee sort of stay on track and help us keep in sync with our staff support too.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. Well, first of all, I think primary kudos should go to Cynthia for making sure that this work plan gets prepared each year. As you all know, we have our annual meeting in June. Board members who have new terms or get recently elected to the board or appointed to the board start July 1st of each year. Typically during the summer, things are fairly quiet, not only in town at the university, but also with the partnership. And then when the students get back on campus, things, of course, enliven quite a bit, and our year for the partnership really gets underway. So Cynthia prepares the draft work plan in order to establish for the committee, one is a reminder of what the responsibilities are of the committee, but two, to make sure that we address those responsibilities, and three, that we do them in a timely fashion. So if you take a look at the work plan that's part of our agenda package, you'll notice that she has listed annual goals, monthly goals, bi-monthly goals, and then she set forth by each month, September through June, September through August, September, what we are expected to accomplish by each of those months. So let's take, for example, some of the annual goals. Number 3, make bylaws modifications to support effective organization management. The governance committee has responsibilities that are dictated by the bylaws, as well as partnership policies. And one of the responsibilities is to make sure that our bylaws are up to date. And therefore, when bylaw changes are in order, it's up to the governance committee to suggest those bylaw changes to the full board of directors. If our recommendation for bylaw changes are accepted by the board of directors, then they go up for vote at the annual meeting by the members of the partnership. Similarly, the governance committee is responsible for making sure we have a full slate of directors, some of whom are elected at the June annual meeting. Others are appointed by the president of the university, and others are appointed by the Mansfield Town Council. And the governance committee is expected to, for example, maintain a roster of potential board candidates who would be elected by the members during our annual meeting. And along with that, it's our, I suppose, also our responsibility to follow up to make sure that the town council is appointing their slate of town appointments, and that the president of the university is also appointing university members of our board. Take, for example, that bylaws responsibility that we have. If you look down, let's see, this would be January. Review bylaws. So the work plan is telling us now that by January, we should be reviewing the bylaws to see if we think there should be any changes, so that there's an adequate amount of time for us to forward those proposed changes to the board of directors. And then there's adequate time for the board of directors to act on our recommendations, so that the members get at least 45 days advance notice as required by the bylaws that there will be bylaw changes considered at the annual meeting in June. Going back to annual tasks, review board expectations document. You'll also find in today's package a document called board expectations, things that we expect each board member to be honoring while they're on our board. As the governance committee, we should be reviewing this document periodically to make sure that we feel it's up to date and it meets all the necessities, requirements, or benefits of having such a document. So agenda item number 5 today is reviewing our board expectations document. Also among the annual tasks is nominating board members. It's the responsibility, as I mentioned earlier, for our committee to make sure that there's a slate of elected members that will be proposed to the membership in June. And if you go down to November, you'll see it says review board pipeline. Frank's first 3-year term is up in June 2023, elected. So I take that to mean, Frank, that you're an elected member of the board. Is that correct?
Hmm,
Aren't you appointed?
I am appointed. That was.
Should that read appointed, Cynthia, rather than elected?
Or was it somebody else?
Probably, yeah, let me just get my,
Well, in any event,
yeah,
Frank is appointed by the president of the university for a 3-year term to the board. And apparently his first 3-year term is due to expire in June of next year. Our bylaws provide that board members, whether they are elected or appointed, can serve for 2 consecutive 3-year terms. So one of our responsibilities would be to designate somebody on the committee to contact Frank and inquire of Frank whether he's willing to serve for a second 3-year term. And their additional responsibility would be not to take no as an answer. Ron, I believe, may have been elected to serve out the term of or to fill a vacancy, which terminated in June of 2023.
That's right.
So Ron would be eligible for a full 3-year term come June of 2023. And our committee, we would probably designate someone to contact Ron to see if he's willing to serve for a full 3-year term. And therefore, he would be on the slate of nominees at the June annual meeting to be elected by the membership for that full 3-year term. Ryan needs to be reappointed for June 2023. And our student reps, Colby and Rachel, under our bylaws, serve a 1-year term. So it's necessary to determine if Colby and Rachel want to serve for an additional 1-year term. As you may recall, Prabhas was a senior last year. He graduated in May, and therefore we had to do a search for our student representatives. And it's the responsibility of the governance committee to make recommendations to the board, which, unlike elected members, student representatives are appointed by the board of directors. And typically the recommendation would come from the governance committee to the board for student reps, but that has to be done on an annual basis. So I guess the point of this discussion, which is pretty elementary to those of you who have served on the board for a number of years or on this committee for a number of years, my explanation of what the purpose of this work plan is. But I think it's probably helpful for Rachel and Ron to get a little information from me regarding what the work plan is designed to do. So the
It's also
annual.
helpful to the rest of us, Steve,
Oh, okay.
who don't remember quite as much as we used to.
Well, and your experience, I think what happened is over the years, it's gotten refined a little bit, right? And it goes through these, that you have some rhythm of the committee. And if there's anything that needs to be adjustment, like let's talk about it now and make adjustments if you see something.
Sure.
I imagine this is all in the bylaws and I should look more closely, but I assume a student may only continue as long as he or she remains a student. So if somebody graduated mid-year, for example, at that point they would.
The one exception to that, Ron, is that a graduate student is permitted to serve on our board.
Okay,
So an undergraduate who continues their education at the University of Connecticut in a master's or PhD program theoretically could continue to serve on the board.
Okay.
I suppose for a number of years, depending upon what their graduate program might be. But graduate students are eligible to serve on the board. So it is possible for an undergraduate to continue serving the board on the board as a graduate student. But yes, a closer look at the bylaws would answer that question. So what Frank is suggesting is that we can not only look at the work plan as a task list, and also a time deadline for completing these tasks, but we also have the ability as a committee to revise this work plan. It is true that, as Frank said, from year to year, it gets refined, probably not in a great, with a great amount of modification, because we've kind of worked this out pretty well. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take a close look at it in case we wish to modify it in some fashion. So it's up for discussion whether this committee feels there are any annual goals which are outdated, should be removed, whether there are annual goals that we don't have on this list that should be added, or if there are annual goals that in some fashion should be clarified. And that's open for discussion. One thing that might be unique about this work plan is that we recently completed a strategic action plan, which involved quite a bit of work. And it's quite important that we take steps to ensure that that strategic action plan and its recommendations are put into effect. And so we should be periodically reviewing whether or not that's the case. So that is something that might be a little bit peculiar to this particular work plan, since we are, on the heels of the adoption of the strategic action plan. But most everything else that is an annual goal is something that those committee members who've been members of the committee for some time would probably find familiar.
That's great. Thank you, Steve.
I don't know whether, Frank, you want to go through this on a month-to-month basis, or
I don't, I think because people have a general sense, I do want to ask if any of the committee members have any questions about other items, or Kyle, I wasn't sure about pacing, if these are the initiatives, these line up with your priorities as well. I think this is the reason why it's really helpful to have a president involved in the governance committee, sort of see how, because it really sets it up for the full board, right? Not only for composition and board maintenance, but also for, you can see how the governance committee puts things in motion that eventually get on the full board agenda. So having this all in sync is very important.
Yeah, I think, Frank, the only point that I would make especially relative to board appointments and board positions, et cetera, is, we've had a rather robust conversation about the diversity of the board and the necessity for us to continue that conversation. And I think, that's something we should talk about with the president of the university and perhaps with members of the town council, especially when we're talking about positions that are appointed as opposed to elected, to make sure that the board is that we're addressing that, because I think that we've talked about that as a goal. Certainly diversity in the conventional sense, but also diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of background, those types of things. I think, I think it's important for us to make sure that we're selfless about that. And, and if there are, ways to improve the makeup of the board in that way, then we should have those conversations. So, again, respectful of the timeline and the work plan as it's laid out. Just want to make sure that that we don't put the cart before the horse simply because it says on the chart that we need to accept appointments at a certain time. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be having a conversation about it.
Yeah. Well noted. And last year, I was delighted that the board said that they wanted an additional voice from the students, and I was glad that as a governance committee we could help the board pivot and add a second position, and I think that's really helped us out. And, now we have Rachel joining us on governance, and Colby's on another committee, so that it does spread things out. And I think that's a good point, that the work plan is a guideline, but it doesn't sort of lock you in perfectly. We do have to be adaptable. But it sort of also drives like what our agendas are. So next month, our agenda will start be talking about the pipeline and board recruitment. And I think your points, Kyle, are really important. That's the time when we need to start really talking about how do we build that pipeline? How do we network? And what are the areas that we're looking for expertise and viewpoints from? Any other points to this? This has been very helpful, Steve. Thank you for outlining that. And I think it's a really helpful refresher for all of us. You helped us point us out why it's important to read this. And because we really don't see it again. The only one that looks at this really is Cynthia, month to month, to make sure that we're on track. And so I think this is gonna, any other items? Anybody want to, any comments? I want to make sure I don't shut this down. No? Great. Thank you very much. I think, Cynthia, I think this will adopt this as our plan going forward. But if you see anything that we need to review during this time, during the year, just bring it to our attention. The next item, number 5, and I think Steve referred to it as there's a connection here, and it's sort of also connected to Kyle's comments. It's talking about the board expectations, board involvement, and the board nominator forms. We've spent a lot of time as a committee on these two to refine them over time, and one of the key contributors to that was Diana. And I'm similarly, I was hoping you could go through some of this and what you have experienced both as a governance committee member, but also as president, and why these were important and how we use these as a committee.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. As Steve said, I want to point out Cynthia and the staff have really stayed on top of these forms. But I went back when I got this because when I had first started, we had started a strategic plan with Christensen Consulting, Francine Christensen, and that was in 2016. And that's when I think we really were looking into all these things and what we needed as a board and how we could move forward as a board. And that manual, was really where we started looking at all these items. And obviously our board involvement and our expectations was a big part of that. As Frank says, with so many of these things, they need to be living and changing. I mean, this has been so many years. When I looked and thought that was 2017, that first manual. So, it changes, it moves, but, our staff every year has been really looking at it and updating it. But I do think it'll be a good thing for us to, look into it. I guess we would start with a nominator form. We would nominate people. And as we look at the form, we really want anybody and everybody to be filling this out throughout the year. And I don't know that we have that, forward on people's thoughts, because there can be such random times that would come up that you might think, oh, that person, we might want to do that. And it doesn't need to just be us on governance. So as you look through that form, there's expertise and there's committees and there's information. And I guess as we would all look through that form, we want to see if there's things we want to add, and just checking into and what we need as a governance committee. We put it out to our other board members and things of what we're looking for. If we're looking for, if there's a time we need maybe financial, we need strategic plan, whatever, which we're doing, I think, really well with our new task force. And I think that's helping us kind of pull it together, putting people in more specific roles. Our board member expectations, all throughout the years, I've felt that it's very reasonable. I feel we're, we've got a great board. But I feel, what our expectations are very doable for board members. COVID changed some of these things, but I think we really want to get back to, some of those things that we can get back to are, coming out to the events, things like that. The resources thing, all those things. So I think we really want to be looking at that. And I think this one was from 2020. So, if we look now, to 2022, do we want to add some things? I don't know how much has changed. There's, I think the expectations are pretty straightforward. There's some things that as a new person, I know I would have had to ask questions about, legal standards and ethical norms, always ask questions about those things. If you really, because you feel like we have to assure the partnership adheres, what does that mean? Ask, if there's something that, if you're a newer member, and even, for me, there's, things that I would, as a president and when I was a board member, would have to ask about, and what my responsibility in that was, and how, how I could be involved in that. So, so really, recheck that as a member and, look at your expectations. The board involvement, any questions on those first two, the nominations or the expectations?
So the nomination,
Mhm.
the person doesn't have to have accept it. It could be very preliminary. Say, hey, here's an idea. Somebody who, hey, I'm talking to them at Big Y, and I think they might be interested.
Yep.
You can just complete this and send it to the staff.
Yep.
And they'll collect it for the purpose of the governance committee. So I think that's a good point, Diana, that maybe at our
Great
next
point.
meeting, full board meeting, I'll make that point that everybody should be thinking about this all the time. There is a form to use, but if you hear of somebody interested in it, let's try to use this as a documentation so that we confirm, all right, who is bringing the name forward? What areas do we think that they contribute to? So thank you.
Yeah, and not even at a time when we need members, to have a list, and if somebody's nominated, the governance committee, can go through it, and if it doesn't fit at that time, that's fine. It's just nice to have a running list, and we can always revisit or touch base. So it's just good to have information and names. So. Any questions on the board expectations from anybody, especially our newer members?
In terms of acting as an organization ambassador, that is something that one would want to coordinate, obviously, with Cynthia closely rather than go off in independent directions.
Oh, in our board involvement options?
Right. Sharing resources.
Yeah, so, because we have that, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. I guess it depends on what, in what capacity we're looking at that, right, Cynthia? How we're looking at it as ambassador?
I'm sorry, I guess so Ron, you were asking whether we
Oh.
track the.
Under
board
ensuring
involvement
resources,
options?
act as an organization ambassador as a board member. That would be something that would be well coordinated by you and by the, centrally, rather than having people undertake on their own conveying the message.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good example is whenever we have, at the festival, we had 4 board members, actually 5, Ron, because I think you served there as well, making sure that you guys are prepared, that you have talking points, things like that. The board doesn't speak in front of the council as much as it used to when we were building the downtown, but that was definitely something where, the staff can help with the appropriate talking points. UConn open houses, a couple of different examples.
Yep.
And Ron, like she said, the open houses, when I first started, I was doing some of those and there was always notes there for me, basic notes, all the information. So it was very much, and there is a list that I still keep with me that Cynthia updates with just facts about the downtown, you know, some numbers and figures.
Yeah.
So, and you can get, you know, a hold of that and,
Yep.
and then just as simple as being an ambassador about, you know, which I can move on to the board involvement options, you know, because that third part of that is act as a partnership ambassador, representative, and advocate.
Mhm.
Attending, you know, the events, you know, assisting with all the long-term sustainability of the partnership, all those things, writing letters, those are being an ambassador and going downtown, you know, I did wonder if we might want to add social media posts to that. You know, if you go into one of the downtown, now that social media is so prevalent, you know, take a picture if you don't want it to be you of your food and just a shout out to the to your, you know, your friends and your groups about where you've been. You know, the volunteering at 2 events, that's just really good for you to get to know the other board members. It's usually when I get to actually speak to them, and, you know, find out more about their lives and what they're doing. Aside from, you know, seeing Cynthia and Kathleen and Denise and Josh in action, you know, doing all those things that they've put all those hours into doing. You know, and then, you know, serving on a committee like this one, obviously you just get more of the inside of what's going on. So, and now that we have so many, like I said, different working groups because of the task force, I think, you know, you can really kind of get it. I think people can really choose something that they're a little more interested in. You know, that kind of piques their interest a little more than maybe just being assigned to a committee. So, so anyway, it's really important, as you know, to, I'm sure Kyle and, you know, Frank running this committee, that the board members are active and involved. It's really what makes it all work.
Diana, I just have one comment, if I might.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
I think that if someone is going to appear or comment at a public meeting, they need to check with Cynthia or someone on staff to make
Mhm.
sure that nothing's changed in what they think they're going to talk about, just so that we, you know, we don't have any loose cannons out there.
I agree, Betsy.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Ron.
When I look at the involvement options, I recognize that some members have, each member brings different strengths to the board, right? And that some may be really good at their committee work, or somebody else prefers volunteering, likes doing the events. So I think as a governance committee, we're sort of watching the full board, right? And all the members, and how are we covering all the grounds that we need? And, you know, I think as something like an ambassador, it's great having having a second student rep again, because we have a lot of students we want to cover, right? And sort of having that connection, that link to,
Yeah.
as an influencer on the student body, is really important for us. And I think that was a good way for the board adapted. But we should all be looking at that to make sure we got the right composition of board, and that all the gaps are being filled. Any other comments? Steve? Steve? He's on mute, but he's still on mute. I'd like to try to unmute you, but what happened here?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. I don't know how extensive the package might be for the next board meeting, but you might consider, Frank and Cynthia, including the board member expectations, board involvement options, and nominator form in the board package.
Good idea.
The purpose of expectations and options would just be a reminder to board members what's expected of them and what options they might have in terms of involvement. And with respect to the nominator form, Frank, you might explain to board members, whether it's in the package or not, that that form is only the first step in the process. That typically, when anyone fills out that form, the individual that they've suggested gets vetted in some fashion by the governance committee before that person's actually approached
Yeah.
about serving on the board. So, you might consider that.
That's a good point. It's almost like you're thinking of it with the end in mind, right? What the expectations of a board member are and sort of the ways they get involved, and who would be able to fulfill those expectations. Might trigger somebody to add to as a nomination. So maybe Cynthia and Kyle, we can talk about if there's time at the next meeting, if I could use a little bit of airtime under the governance committee report, just highlighting what we talked about today.
Frank,
Betsy? Yep.
if I understood Steve, I think what he's saying is that this form doesn't guarantee that someone will be nominated. And I think somehow you need to convey that. It's a suggestion for nominations to the board. And depending on all the characteristics you talked about, what we're lacking, what we need, what area that person is in. If we've got 19 and a half people from Yukon on the board, we're not going to put another Yukon person on there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thank
I
you,
don't know.
Betsy. I didn't hear that. In that way. That's very helpful. Perhaps we describe this just title the form differently.
Mhm.
That's a really good point. It's really just developing a pipeline of people for the governance committee and the executive committee to be considering. As
And
potential
you
board
also
members.
don't know at any given time when a person might resign. So it's good to have a file that we can look at without all of us going, oh my God, so-and-so is resigning and so is so-and-so, and we got to get somebody on the
Right.
board before,
Yeah, and I also want to make sure that I'm not seeing everybody. Like I don't think we're seeing everybody. I want people that are heavily involved in the festival committee that I may not interact with.
Yeah.
That I want them to be nominated for the board or put the name put forward for consideration of the board. From other groups, not just originating from this governance committee. It should be coming from everyone on our board and extended volunteers. Cynthia, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just two things. I think that with respect to what Betsy said, I think on the agenda, when I called it board nominator form, the actual title probably is what we need to refer to it as, because that does say candidate profile. So I think that points to the fact that this is a profile, not necessarily that this person is definitely nominated. And Kyle and I have our agenda meeting on Wednesday morning. Right now, we don't have a heavy agenda. So he and I can talk about it on Wednesday if we want to include a little bit more on governance. Unless Kyle feels differently.
Well, that's perfect.
I think that's good. Then we have, when you collect these from people, you put it into our pipeline, and then we would let somebody know if they had put somebody's name forth, we would let them know that have gone to the next step, right, after they've been vetted a little bit. And just keep them informed. That's our commitment to whoever puts the name forward, that will keep them informed as the progress of how that, if somebody's being advanced for the board. Good. Great. Well, thank you. Is there anything else on these 3 documents?
I'm sorry, Frank, I just did on Diana's piece. Do you want me to
Yeah.
add that on the board involvement options about adding
If-
the social
we
media
could-
posts?
You know, if we could, because it'll be perfect timing ahead of our next governance committee, where we will be talking about this. So I'd like to be able to present it if in November, if possible.
Yeah, so I'll add something to the effect of when you're out and about promotion. I don't know, I'm gonna word it a little broader probably,
Okay.
but
That'd be great. Thank you. And thank you, Diana, for leading that overview and discussion. Steve, I feel like we've got like one of those webinars, right? We've got it all recorded now. So next year I just have to press play. Listen to this again, but it's very important to have this continual review. Number 6 on our agenda is update on the strategic action plan and work groups. I'm not sure there's too much to report back on. Usually we look to Sean for this, but there was our business owner and community engagement. We talked about the next social. We did a review of the last one. Kyle and Cynthia, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to report out. Thank you to all those who attended that at BIMP. We had a very nice showing of some university leadership and to mix it up, and so that I think that helps raise a little buzz, right, about the interest of the university in what's going on downtown. So do we have anything settled for the next, or what we were looking at for the next one, or is that still to come?
I don't think anything, I think next on the radar is the sort of the holiday reception, and
Okay.
we'll see where we are from there.
Right. All right, on item number 7, our next meeting, I just put in person to see how people are feeling. This is a very effective group. Yeah, Cynthia,
I'm sorry.
that's all right. It's
Did I
family.
just-
Jump in.
You are in my house right now. So just, can I just do some quick updates on promotion in public spaces?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right, so we do have a meeting on Wednesday, but just a couple of key things, one of which will be, assuming that Kyle and I agree on Wednesday, coming to the board is a engagement with the landscape architecture program to do an inventory and then evaluation of street furniture, shade structure. I think most of this group knows that, you know, we've been talking about that, especially the shades, potential shade structure. So this draft contract will be coming to the board next week. It's something Sean and I have been working on with Jill DeSimini, who's the head of the landscape architecture program. So they're really excited about using their classes in the spring semester to help us. This is very similar to 2 engagements we did before with landscape architecture program through Kristen Schwab, who was on our board for 6 years. And then we do have almost all the window clings. So we haven't been successful thus far in kind of getting the windows, the vacant windows painted, but we do have some window clings, which was a suggestion from, I think, Sean and Kara. So we'll be putting those up probably sometime around Thanksgiving, just to make things look a little brighter. Snowflakes, a couple of village scenes, you know, very sort of straightforward. So I did want to just mention that there's some movement on some of those items.
Thank you for that update, Cynthia. Now back to item 7, The next meeting, whether I just put it a question mark, whether we just want to entertain the question about whether we try to do it in person or not. I think this group seems to be pretty effective on Zoom, but it also helps to be, at times want to take the temperature here, so to speak, and see if people have an interest in meeting. And the thought I had is that this group is a little hard to put in that conference room. Typically, we've been in the conference room upstairs in the partnership offices. But I did ask Cynthia if it was a possibility to meet in the Nash Zimmer downstairs and have the table set up so we had greater space. Now, anyway, I think that's an option. And I just want to see everyone's thoughts on whether they want to move to in person, like we have our board meetings are in person, or if it's preferred for accessibility and safety's sake, stay as a Zoom committee meeting. Any thoughts?
I would say I prefer the Zooms. Mondays are rough to get out early and head over. So,
Okay.
So it definitely would be helpful to, again, I do think at some point, perhaps, once or twice a year, we could get together in person and do it as a bit of a, perhaps even a social where we get together and grab some appetizers and a drink and at the tail end of a meeting, something like that. But but I do think for efficiency's sake, the committee and working group meetings being in Zoom, I think have become really efficient.
Thanks, Kyle. Betsy?
I agree. And the other thing is we're coming into crappy weather time. And at my age, I don't like to drive in icy, sleety, crappy weather. So I like Kyle's idea of having us get together a couple times a year, 2 or 3 times a year, and in person, but then staying on Zoom. I think we'll get more of our members to attend our meetings doing it on Zoom. Because you can
Yep.
have something going on in your office and then 5 minutes later, there's a Zoom meeting, but you can be there. But if you have to go find your car and get over to the garage, it takes longer.
That's a good point. Anything else? I mean, we may want to reserve when we're interviewing board members. And I was thinking about when we were doing the students last year. It was fine by Zoom. It's always easier to do it in person, or more informative when you do it in person. So perhaps what I'm hearing is that there, as a standard, maybe we stick to Zoom for some efficiency, but that there may be times, whether it's social or there may be conversations that are just easier to have in person, and we'll leave that as a case-by-case basis. Ron and Rachel, I want to make sure that, how do you guys have sort of come on during the time of Zoom, so you don't know the difference, I guess. Oh, Ron, you're
The only time a Zoom meeting is maybe not as good as it might be is when there's paper to be distributed, because it's hard to see all that and continue the conversation when you're trying to look at the screen. Other than that, I think the Zoom meetings are fine.
okay. Excellent. When we meet next meeting, we're going to start talking about the pipeline for the board. And sometimes that type of confidential information is just easy. I don't know. I always feel more comfortable doing it in person.
Yeah.
But I think we can, if we needed to, we could go into executive session, depending upon the nature of where the conversation goes. Does that sound good? All right.
Yeah, I agree with Diana about having a couple in-person meetings, and then and with Frank that sometimes there's paperwork and there's meetings that we would just want to do in person based on the topics. So I think maybe it could be, we normally meet over Zoom, but whenever there's an exception, we can try and meet in person and perhaps on Wednesdays instead of Mondays, if that's better for our schedules.
Thank you, Rachel. So I think let's stick with Zoom for November. At the end of each meeting, I think you guys can remind me just to confirm that the next, whatever the next meeting is, it's going to be Zoom, or if we're going to be trying to do something in person at that time. But I think for right now, the pace will be more Zoom, and making more of an effort to meet each other socially at some of our events. I'm hoping to see some of you at our trick-or-treating downtown, some of the other social events. It's actually, I was delighted by the festival too. We had a good showing by board members. So I think it's really important to get us all out there and encourage our fellow members to be getting out and really fulfilling that service commitment early on. I think the emeritus members of this board are showing off, right? And really setting the pace and getting involved and encouraging those board members to step it up too. So great. Well, thank you very, very much. Is there anything else that the group needs to discuss at this time? No, it's been great seeing everyone. I'll take a motion for adjournment when you're ready. Betsy, quick to, oh, you're on.
Second.
Thank you.
Second, Diana.
Kyle, you missed it.
It's okay. I let somebody else. If somebody wants to get their name in the minutes, that's fine.
Great. Thank you all for attending. It was a very productive meeting. It was a great to recap and sort of know where we're charged for the upcoming year. So we'll see.
I have a very quick question. It has nothing to do with the meeting. Is neighborhood Halloween on Monday night? Is that when kids will be out trick or treating? Does anybody know?
I don't know. Usually it's actual Halloween.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's early enough. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to get some extra candy just in case. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. All those in favor of adjournment? Right. Unanimous, Josh. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Good evening.
Night.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.